Season 3, Episode 5 of A View from the Left Side, New Strategies for a New World Order was recorded on March 5, 2025. Hello, I'm Pamela Powers of Powers for the People. Welcome to my podcast, A View from the Left Side. Well, it certainly didn't take long for President Donald Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance to revive the ugly American brand. At the end of the 7th week of Trump's second term, the United States, the world, and global financial markets are reeling from bad decisions and walkbacks. Trump is not just a flimflam man, he's a flip-flopping flimflam man. It's amazing what has happened since I recorded my last podcast just a week ago. On Friday, February 28, a shockingly inappropriate exchange between Trump, Vance, and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky broke our 80-year transatlantic alliance with Europe in less than 10 minutes. Trump has been trying to extort mineral rights from Zelensky in exchange for brokering a peace deal between Ukraine and Russia. Zelensky is justifiably mistrustful of Russian President Vladimir Putin, who has broken multiple deals with Ukraine over the years. He's also distrustful of Trump, whose administration recently met with Russia to work on a deal without Ukraine there. Also, prior to the meeting, Trump lied about Zelensky and called him a dictator. He also called him the aggressor in the war with Russia, which is another lie. At the White House meeting, with the press cameras rolling, Zelensky asked for security assurances from the U.S. before signing away the mineral rights. Trump became combative and morphed into Godfather Vito Corleone. I told you we weren't going to discuss that now. I have all the cards. You have no cards. I am making you an offer you can't refuse. Okay, he didn't say the last line, but the mob boss vibe was definitely there. Vance went junkyard dog on Zelensky, and a right-wing alternative media journalist heckled him and asked Zelensky why he wasn't wearing a suit. After a shouting match that lasted several minutes, poor Zelensky was booted out of the White House. The U.S. also recently voted with Russia and against Ukraine in the United Nations. Over the weekend, our former European allies solidified their alliance with each other and with Ukraine and without us, although they were polite enough to sort of leave the door open if we come to our senses. All of a sudden, the U.S. is allied with Russia against the rest of Europe. Longtime anti-communist, anti-Russian Republicans in Congress are sporting fur hats and decorating their desks with nesting Russian dolls. Okay, they don't have the hats and the dolls, but I'm totally ready for them to start pounding their desks with their shoes like Nikita Khrushchev. Can't you see Marjorie Taylor Greene doing that? That's totally her kind of thing. And, she also likes fur. On Monday, March 3rd, Trump announced his long-anticipated 25% tariffs on goods from Mexico and Canada, and an increased tariff from 10 to 20% on goods from China. These started on Tuesday, March 4. Canada and China immediately retaliated. Canada applied a 25% tariff on our goods, and China said, "Bring it on. We are ready for any war that the U.S. wants to start." Okay, let's step back from the edge with the machismo. I don't think this is working. Evidence of it not working? Global financial markets tanked after Trump's announcement. Also on Tuesday, Trump gave a 99-minute address to a joint session of Congress that was filled with lies, put-downs, and bullying. Among other things, he lied about the economy under President Joe Biden and talked about how awesome the economy was since he took over 6 weeks earlier. left out of the speech was any mention of the massive 24-hour stock market tumble since the tariffs were announced. The Dow Jones Industrial Average was down 1.4%, the S&P 500 was down 1.75%, and the NASDAQ was down 2.6%. These are small percentages, but they represent a lot of money. He's also ignoring backlash from angry American consumers who are organizing targeted boycotts against specific Trump-friendly corporations, protesting at Tesla dealerships, and hounding congressional Republicans at local town halls. Earlier in the week, pundits were remarking that Trump is the first U.S. president to purposefully start his own recession. Late on Thursday, CNN reported that Trump signed an executive order pausing the tariffs against Mexico and Canada for a month. Today, March 7th, Friday, the New York Times is reporting that thanks to Trump, the U.S. stock market saw its worst week in months this week. Another first, Mr. President. You are a stable genius. Casting off our long-term allies, jumping in bed with Russia, starting a trade war with our biggest trading partners, crashing Wall Street, tanking world financial markets, pissing off consumers, and lying about all of it in a joint session of Congress on national TV in prime time. Wow, Trump had a big week. Oh, I almost forgot. We also learned that this week several states have had measles outbreaks. The upside of the measles outbreak, though, is that DOGE has hired back some of those CDC workers that they fired. Yeah, maybe we need some of those public health people. So much winning. Pass me the antidepressants before RFK Jr. outlaws them. Oh my God. For years, the right has been railing against the deep state. Also known as the administrative state, the deep state is comprised of professional staff who write the rules and procedures to implement laws passed by Congress. But in the right-wing media, these often well-educated bureaucrats are portrayed as an evil, unelected shadow government that actually controls the country. Now, Trump has tasked Elon Musk's DOGE, a shadow group of unelected allies, to decommission the old deep state. Besides hacking away at government programs, firing bureaucrats, and snooping on us, we know little about who Musk's young computer geeks are or what they're doing. Ironically, or not maybe, the Trump administration has hired a non-transparent shadow group, DOGE, to kill off the former shadow government, the deep state. Is the election of Donald Trump part of a larger Antisystems revolt? Did some frustrated voters see Trump's bombastic behavior and imposing strongman persona and say to themselves, stuff is effed up. I'm going to vote for this guy because he's going to shake shit up, and then roll the dice for change? Maybe. I agree that some systems like immigration, for-profit healthcare, and elections controlled by money and gerrymandering have been broken systems for years. There has been zero political will on either side of the aisle to fix these broken problems and many others. When Democrats defend institutions and government programs that should be reformed, we look weak and out of touch. I see the anti-system revolt as part of the upheaval and discontent that accompanies a shift in socioeconomic cycles as described in the book The Storm Before the Calm. If this is indeed the end of the Ronald Reagan trickle-down economics era, new economic strategies will be necessary to pull us out of Trump's mess and help the United States move forward in the future. Where are our strategies for a new world order? Democrats should be suggesting reforms to fix broken systems instead of just reacting to the unfolding chaos of Project 2025. We need our own Project 2029, and we need to be writing it yesterday. Today's episode features a wide-ranging interview on these and other topics with three longtime political authors from Blog for Arizona. Tucson lawyer and former prosecutor Michael Bryan founded Blog for Arizona more than 20 years ago. B for AZ has been publishing continuously since then. Retired lawyer and former newspaper journalist Larry Bodine is past chair of Legislative District 18 Democrats in Pima County and has been on the board of Democrats of Greater Tucson for 5 years, including 3 years as president. Phoenician David Gordon has had a career in education and is a successful science fiction author in addition to being a prolific political blogger. His experience in science fiction writing probably informs his coverage of the Arizona legislature. Thanks, you guys, for joining me for my podcast today. We have with us Mike Bryan, David Gordon, and Larry Bodine, all from Blog for Arizona. And we're going to jump right into it and talk about, politics on multiple levels. Obviously, there's a lot going on. And rather than me picking an item, I'm going to let you guys say, what do you think is like the most important challenge we have now going on in our brave new world in the United States since January 2025? Mike, we'll start with you.
Yeah, the thing that disturbs me the most thus far is the refashioning of the world system and the United States' place in it. The fact that Trump has just basically ignored our traditional alliance structures in favor of his personal predilection or, whatever mumbo jumbo he's got going on with dictators around the world. Uh, you know, Divorcing the United States and pulling the United States out of these long-term relationships that have built our place in the world and built our prosperity over the past 80, almost 100 years now, I think is perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the second Trump presidency. It occurred to me, of course, that, he could do damage to our alliances, but entirely turning his back on our traditional alliance partners has weakened our position in the globe vis-a-vis authoritarian regimes across the board, and it's something that I didn't expect there to be absolutely no pushback against in the Republican Party. Rather, they seem to be cheering it on, despite the fact that, traditionally the Republicans have been very strong on national defense and, very adamant on the fact that politics stops at the shore. Apparently no longer. So that, I think, is perhaps the biggest change that this second Trump presidency has brought to the world, and perhaps the most, possibly the most long-lasting and damaging aspect of it.
David, you want to go next?
Yeah, and I want to piggyback on what Mike just said about how the worldview, how there has been no pushback, on traditional circles. I just wrote an article for the blog. You may have seen it yesterday, where I equated Republicans with the characters from an old Twilight Zone called "It's a Good Life," where you have the Billy Mumi character running a 6-year-old running roughshod over this town, and all these guys are so scared of him that they say it's good you killed the crops. No problem. It's good you put him in the cornfield. I mean, this is a good life, and that's what and that's what these Republicans seem like. I mean, these were people that once upon a time, 5 years ago, were relatively sane, and would have, but now they just bend the knee because they're like, don't hurt me. That's my thinking, and I agree with you.
Literally, don't hurt me. They have the Proud Boys going out and hurting people.
Right,
So literally, don't hurt me.
or they're worried about Elon Musk funding a primary. And yeah, I mean, not a lot of brave people in the former party of Lincoln. I mean, you got Lynn Cheney, you got Adam Kinzinger, you've got the former lieutenant governor of Georgia. I mean, these are people that appeared at the DNC convention. Larry and Michael were there; they saw them. But these guys are, they sold their souls uh, for donors, and it's they are not putting They're not putting the country above their own interests.
Larry, how about you?
Well, I agree with David that the Republicans have sold their soul basically to donors. And what's happening is there's a lot of pushback. The Republicans won't state anything out front, but there's, in public, but behind closed doors, there's a lot of pushback against, raising the debt ceiling, passing all these tax cuts that will, increase the deficit. And what's happening is Republicans are going home and holding town halls, and they're facing like these furious town hall meetings where people are just outraged at the cuts to the weather service, the national parks, all the things that we, rely on and enjoy. And what's happened is Trump's popularity in at least 2 or 3 polls has just cratered.
Mhm.
And it's to the point that James Carville says, the public should keep the pressure on the Republicans, and it's there's going to be a collapse in the Trump regime in about 30 days or so. They're not going to get a budget bill passed. They're not going to, they're doing all these outrageous things like Trump thinks he can revoke the Constitution by just saying, we're just going to get rid of birthright citizenship with an executive order. And he's also facing opposition on the U.S. Supreme Court. In fact, just today, the Supreme Court ruled against Trump and said that Trump had to unfreeze all the money that had been taken away from the foreign aid program. So I think there's a lot of fury out there, a lot of anger, and it's building up, and something's going to give.
Yeah.
I think this is unsustainable, what's happening. There has been so many changes and so much pushback, not just pushback against Trump and the Republicans, but people saying, Democrats, come on, what are you doing? What's your plan? And things like that, But I guess for me, the biggest thing is that, we've got a shadow government, running, in my opinion, I don't think that Trump is really making the decisions. I did a podcast just last week that, and I asked, what's his diagnosis? I mean, I don't think that he's, mentally capable, and we need to see his medical records for mental health and physical health. And in fact, there was a interview that I saw the other night with Heather Cox Richardson, and she was saying, well, we've watched him, decline in his, mentally, and which is visible in his speech, over, the last couple of years with the campaign, and she was even saying, there's somebody else who's calling the shots. And, she gave a few examples of things that he's done with executive orders, which he never really talked about on the campaign trail. So, I mean, we know about Elon Musk, who's unelected with his DOGE team, and, they're hacking away at the government and looking at our data and firing people and things like that. So that's sort of, one part of a shadow government. But I think that there's other people, calling the shots, So what do you guys think of DOGE and who's actually running the show in this administration?
Well,
I think you're right on the nose, Pam. Trump is too senile and too stupid to begin with. And the people who wrote Project 2025 also wrote all of the 70 executive orders that he's issued. And what's driving it is basically a money grab. For instance, Musk has rolled out this new Grok 3 AI technology, which apparently has taken the market by storm. And it can compile more information than any other program that any other company offers. And so it makes total sense that, well, he wants the records from Social Security, the Treasury, the IRS, so he can dump it all into this AI program and use it to control people, tell people who don't agree with him that, if you don't get on the boat and, grab your share of the money while you have a chance, we're going to run somebody against you in a primary.
yeah.
I think from my perspective, which is more of a constitutional and legal perspective, the DOGE is a challenge to the constitutional order, and it's clearly unconstitutional by any conventional reading of our Constitution and the precedents of the Supreme Court up until now. The question is whether or not the Supreme Court is going to go along with this grab. I agree with Larry that it's a power grab, But it's not just a money grab; it's a power grab. The executive branch is trying to wrest control of budgeting away from the legislature, which is, assigned to the legislature specifically in our Constitution. There is not only the constitutional principle that that the legislature controls the money, the budgeting of the United States, but also the fact that there has been a long string of cases, as well as legislation on what they call impoundment. Impoundment is when the legislature passes a spending bill and says the executive and the other branches of government have to spend money on X. If the president says, well, I don't want to spend money on X and withholds that money, that's called an impoundment. And there's an Anti-Impoundment Act passed by Congress, reauthorized, I think, in the last 10 years, universally. And in fact, that was the reason why Trump was impeached the first time was impoundment. He tried to withhold Ukraine aid that the legislature had passed, about $400 million, if I recall correctly. And that was the reason he was impeached. And now he's doing the exact same thing through DOGE and through his executive orders, trying to reorder the spending priorities and shut off funds that he doesn't like for DEI or whatever the hell excuse he's come up with. But regardless of the excuse, it is unconstitutional. And so the question will eventually come before the Supreme Court. And the question is whether the Supreme Court is going to give him a constitutional pass, just as they did in the U.S. v. Trump case, where they essentially said that he's above the criminal law and can't be criminally prosecuted for anything he does as part of his official duties. We'll see if the Supreme Court wants to basically break the Constitution, break 250 years of precedent, break 250 years of separation of powers in our government, and break the Anti-Impoundment Act, and allow President Trump to decide what he's going to spend and what he's not going to spend. That's the question, and it's unanswered.
My thoughts on DOGE were we knew all about it. Trump tried to plead ignorance, but going to your point, Pamela, I mean, he brought in the people that wrote the damn thing. I mean, his budget director was the architect of it. Several other people in the Oval Office and cabinet, they're all fans of 2025, of Project 2025. For some inexplicable reason, voters believed this idiot when he said, "I know nothing about it," and all that. And going to Michael's point about, him going for cutting programs and you had the press secretary going off, well, we found all this waste, fraud, and abuse. Translation, it's programs they don't like. They call waste, fraud, and abuse.
Yes.
And, I mean, and sometimes they even make shit up. Excuse my French, Pamela, like $50 million for condoms in Gaza. Or if I got that, they threw out two figures. Yesterday at that farce called a joint address to Congress, he talks about people older than the country itself getting Social Security. I mean,
That's been debunked so many times. Yeah.
Yeah,
I know it. I didn't watch the State of the Union or the address to Congress is what it was called, but you guys make really good points, and I had forgotten about that he was impeached for impoundment last time,
Yep.
and I know that everything old is new again, right?
Yeah.
In fact, I wanted to ask you guys a little bit about this whole idea of anti-systems revolt. Jeet Heer from The Nation has written about this, and so he's talking about this in relationship, for example, to what we saw with young men in particular during the election, where they were listening to podcasts and alternative media, like we are all alternative media, and just the revolting against institutions that don't seem to be working. And I agree, there's a lot of parts of the government that don't work as well as it could, but there was this anti-system thing and sort of the anti-deep state, which is kind of ironic because
Mhm.
now we also have, a non-transparent sort of a shadow government with Elon Musk. And so,
Yeah.
what do you think about this idea of anti-systems feeling? Because if that's the case, in my opinion, then, Democrats ought to, hook into this. It's like, don't try to, um, make excuses for the current system as it is, because lots of parts of it are not working,
Yeah, the
like
anger is real, and
healthcare or
it's
immigration. So,
the anger
Mike,
is
go ahead.
real. Yeah, the anger is real, and it's legitimate, and it's warranted. Uh, you know, the working class and middle class in America hasn't had a raise in 30 years. Our standard of living is not going up, and that was part of the promise of democracy, combined with a free market system, was that you'd be better off than your parents, and that's no longer the case. People can't afford homes. They can't afford to raise a family. Our reproduction rate has plummeted. The number of children that we're having has plummeted because it's just too goddamn expensive. And so, yeah, people are frustrated, and they are legitimately angry at the what has happened as a result of the system that we currently have. They don't make fine distinctions. They just say there's something going wrong. Somebody needs to fix this. And in the last election, that was pretty clear. I mean, there wasn't any kind of mandate in my view. It was a very, very, very narrow win, but it was a win by Trump, and there was a reason for it. It was, Kamala Harris, bless her soul, her program, her policy mix to address the issue was all stuff that she knew she could do within the system. It was all, tax credits for this and that, things that she could do through budget reconciliation. She didn't attack the system or try to or give a big picture critique of the system and say this is how we need to reform the system. We can get money out of politics. We can stop corporations from spending unlimited. We can stop gerrymandering. The big picture things that would make a real difference to how policy is adopted and whose concerns and issues and interests are listened to in our political system. Instead, she focused on this very small ball, whereas people saw Trump, basically, creating IEDs and throwing them into the system, and they're like, "Oh yeah, that guy's going to do something to make things really change." And so they took a bet. It was a bad bet. It was a foolish bet. It was a bet on an insane person, but nonetheless, it was a bet that he was going to do things to shake things up, and that's in fact what has happened. But a lot of the things he's doing, people were like, I didn't vote for that, and reasonably so. And Democrats are probably going to continue to lose unreasonably. I mean, when you look just objectively, like this is a sane person, a sane team of people in Kamala Harris and the governor of Minnesota, Tim. I forget his name even by now. Jesus, yeah, Tim Walz, and versus this like crazy, inexperienced and crazy team under Trump and Vance. Vance has he's been in the Senate for a hot minute. He knows nothing. He's absolutely politically talentless. He's just like this. He's a weird, as Tim Walz put it, this guy's weird. And people still bet on it. It was a very close election, regardless of the fact that just on its face, it was, let's continue doing things competently that people, find useful and, helpful to their lives versus, I want to destroy everything. What? Just a crazy person.
Well, Mike,
The fact that we lose to that is just deeply embarrassing. And I attribute it to the fact that people want to blow the system up. They want real serious systemic change, and Democrats have not offered it, haven't even tried.
Right. Go ahead, Larry.
well, Mike, let me disagree with you a little bit. You got to bear in mind that, Trump won by 1.5%. And
Yeah.
I've been to a lot of meetings trying to, where smarter people than me analyzed the results. And what took place was that Kamala didn't have time to get a campaign off the ground. Joe Biden hung in there too long. He should have bowed out a year earlier than he did. So that completely took the wind out of the Harris campaign, coupled with the fact that
Sure, but my point is it shouldn't have even been close.
Right, I agree. But the other thing that happened was there was a small decline all across Arizona and other areas, a small decline in voting by Democrats. And it was that slight change that allowed Trump to basically squeak in.
Mhm.
And, I don't think people are so much as upset about the system, but on the other hand, nobody voted for Elon Musk.
Mhm.
No one voted to cut off Ukraine at the knees. This isn't what people wanted. No one voted to annex Canada or Greenland or Gaza. And in fact, the new budget bill the Republicans are considering, they want to take over Washington, D.C. None of that stuff is going to happen because here's where Democrats should put their eye on the ball, and that is focus on the cost of groceries, the cost of rent, the cost of a mortgage, the cost of getting a car. You know, the price of eggs is really the hot political item. I mean, that's what people were said about. Everything's just gotten way too expensive, and they blamed it on Biden and it was just enough to discourage a small percentage of Democrats not to go to the polls, and this is the result we get.
Right. I have a few points, and Michael and Larry have heard these from me before, so forgive me for being repetitive. I think in the last election, frankly, to a lot of extent, Democrats have no one to blame but themselves. Either they stayed on the couch, or some of them, like Larry said, the voter turnout on the party. I think also Democrats did not good. When you have a person who is a convicted felon get the popular vote, there's a communication problem somewhere. When you have a person who's been impeached twice, the first time around, you have a communication problem. When you have people voting for the party that did screw you over the last 40 years with Reagan policies, Bush policies, Trump policies, both Bushes, I mean, every source of voter discontent can be traced to a Reagan, a Bush 2, or a Trump policy. And these people, we won't use the S word, but let's say uninformed people have been suckered time and time and time again because they went for the person they perceived as the stronger person. I think Democrats should have stuck with Biden. I think I really do. I really do. I think some of the people that stayed home may have been turned off by fair weather Democrats who turned on him on a dime. You didn't see Republicans dumping Trump after he screwed up the debate with Harris. You didn't see Republicans dumping Trump after two impeachments, 34 convictions, and enabling a domestic terrorist attack on his own capital. I mean, and you have whiny Democrats dumping on Biden for one bad debate performance. I mean, I would have voted for Biden if he was on a respirator.
Mhm.
I mean, come on, guys, get real here. But Michael makes a good point. I think Democrats do need to have a better vision. I mean, it's all well and good to oppose the Republican budget because there's nothing to really support. Although I will say the idea of tax cuts on tips and overtime, I mean, it's superficial, it's shallow, but it's something I think Democrats should embrace when they put their own vision together. They need to have an alternative vision to tell people what they're for as opposed to what they're against. And let's see, I'm just trying to think. The Michigan senator yesterday, going to Larry's point about message, the response to Trump yesterday, two good things for her. It was short, and she based her comments in reality. But apparently, she addressed some of the issues that Larry brought up about the affordability issue. And when we talk about the state politics, you have De Los Santos and Priya talking about an affordability agenda at the state capitol as well. So, Pamela, whatever you want to do now.
Yeah,
I got something I'd like to say to that to what both Larry and David said there. Well, I think it's important, and I think but it's merely emblematic. This whole affordability complaint. People are sick of inflation. Yeah, things are too expensive. Yeah, but that also illustrates an underlying issue that their wages aren't growing. The fact is that if people's wages were keeping up with inflation, it would not be an issue. So I think while you can use the price of eggs as an issue emblematic of that larger complaint. It is merely emblematic. It could have been anything. It's been the price of gas, the price of rent, whatever. But just saying, look, we're going to address affordability is addressing the symptom, not the cause. And I think that's kind of the center hollowness of democratic politics right now, is that we aren't talking about the cause. And when we talk about the cause, we can talk about some of the systemic issues that have caused this decline in our purchasing power, this decline in our wages, this decline in our expectations. And I think that's important for voters because, they often say that elections, this election in particular, runs on vibes. Most voters don't do a close historical analysis of, Republican policy versus Democratic policy over the last 40 years. They don't even do a close analysis of what the two parties are offering. What they do is they do a gestalt analysis of what's in the atmosphere, what things feel like, what their friends are talking about, what they're talking about the water cooler, what's going on social media, and they make their decision on that. And if our gestalt that we were offering the voters was, we know this system is fucked and we're going to do something about it, as opposed to, oh yeah, the system's, not perfect, we're going to make a couple of tweaks here and there, I think it would not have been close. It should not have been close. And it wouldn't have been close if we had been talking about the real issues, as opposed to getting distracted by the shiny objects of whatever is the Republican talking point that day. Oh, eggs are expensive. Oh, gas is expensive. Ignore that. Say, yeah, we know, we sympathize. We're there. We are the middle class. We are the working class. And we understand this. And this is what we're going to do about it. There are big changes that need to be made. And we're the ones who will do it. They aren't. They're in the pocket of billionaires. The billionaires like it exactly the way it is and even rougher on you. And if you think they're going to make your lives better, I got a bridge to sell you, buddy.
Right. Well, Michael, and him and I had this discussion before. What the Democrats should have done in the campaign was say, this is what we've done, and this is what we want to do to better your lives. And included in that would have been like, we will go with the living wage. One of the things Reagan did right in 1980, and God help me for praising a Republican campaign, they ran as a team. Democrats need to run as a team. If you give me more senators, if you give me more representatives, we could get that minimum wage increase across the country. We don't have to rely on the mansions and the cinemas anymore. They should have. I agree with Michael. They should have done that. I do agree. There was a lot of small ball there. It was popular policies, but they didn't throw the long ball. I do agree. I do agree with that. But getting back to the cooler talk and all that. Not a lot of people around the cooler were thinking, don't we remember what life was like under this guy the first time?
Yeah, I like to say, one of the things that, I of course back Kamala Harris, but I think one of the things that I was really disappointed, and I think this really lost her a lot of votes, was when they asked her if she was just going to do what Biden, had done, and then she couldn't come up with anything that she would do differently. I was like, oh no.
Yeah, it was a younger version of Biden. Basically, she was running as, I agree with David that we shouldn't have changed horses. We should have gone with Biden. His polling was looking terrible. The Trump party was feeling all complacent and jubilant because the polling was indicating they were way out ahead. They were definitely going to win, and things got shook up by the Harris change. But I don't think necessarily in any kind of positive way. If we'd have just stuck, and I think sexism has a lot to do with it. I don't know if America's ready for a female president or not. The two times that Trump beat Democrats, he's been running against a woman. The one time he didn't, he was running against Biden, who I will point out is a man. So if we'd have just stuck with Biden, I think we would have had a better chance of beating him with the agenda that we put forward, as opposed to any kind of if I was in charge of the agenda and the message. We probably could have won with the message we had if we'd had a male candidate, in my view, and an incumbent. Harris was untested, and a lot of American public opinion reflected the fact that they weren't comfortable with Harris because, one, she was a woman, and two, she hadn't been president before, whereas both Trump and Biden had been president before. So I think I agree with David, and I said so at the time on the blog that we shouldn't do this. We should stick with Biden.
Now, I think that the big mistake for both parties really was to not force those guys to do debates, both of them. I mean, they didn't, they stopped any challengers to Biden, and so he never really had to do a debate, months before he did that one with Trump, which,
Yeah.
Was disastrous. So this kind of gets into the whole idea of disinformation, though, and also the use of the media. One of the reasons that they said that Trump won was that he wasn't relying on the mainstream media as much as he was, podcasts and alternative media and social media, on his platform and things like that. But also, just the whole level of disinformation, the stuff that was thrown out there that was completely false. And so it's difficult to run against something like that. And so, how do we fight against that sort of disinformation campaign? Because that's not going away. And in fact, it's getting broader, it seems like.
Yeah.
Well, we're fighting disinformation right now with this podcast. And, the problem with Kamala Harris is she was Biden part two. And Biden's record was just welded right onto her. There was no way to get out from under that. However, I've got to tell you, I went to the protest where more than 1,000 people showed up last Saturday outside the Tesla dealership at where was it? It was on Oracle Road and River Road.
Yeah.
And there were just mobs and mobs of people who were extremely
1,300.
well informed. They were incredibly angry. Everybody had a sign to carry. It just completely blotted out the intersection. People were honking horns, and there's a lot of pent-up anger now. And it's just a question of focusing that and demonstrating that look, Trump is not going to raise people's wages. Trump is not going to be any help to the unions, so, to the ordinary working person. And I think we just need to get down to brass tacks and focus on kitchen table issues. It's like Carville and Bill Clinton said, it's the economy, stupid. That's, yes, the price of eggs is an emblem, but it's the wrong kind of emblem if you're an incumbent running for re-election.
Well, I think it comes down to our storytelling skills. The Republicans have proven over and over and over again that they know how to tell a better story. The reason why that debate with Trump and Biden was so devastating to Biden was because they'd been telling a false narrative all throughout the campaign. Was that Biden was meant on the mental decline. He was basically on a respirator in a hospital room and couldn't even think straight, which is utter nonsense. I mean, the man is of a more advanced age, and as you get older, certain facilities decline. Certain words don't come to you as quickly as they did before. And Biden has a speech impediment, and that exacerbates the issue for him. In some circumstances, he will pause and think about the word that he's supposed to do, and he can get a little spacey looking. And they took that kernel of truth and they spun it into a story that was believable and was confirmed live on camera at that moment. And that's what really hurt us, was that they had that pre-existing narrative in place that they could plug into. And it was disinformation, absolutely. And your question was, how do we fight the disinformation? We have to become better storytellers about the candidates, about our agenda, about the history of this country, about the purpose of this country, about the aspirations of its people. We have to tell those stories, and we have to tell them in compelling ways that fight the disinformation, that counter the disinformation counter narratives that they are so good at creating. And that's what it comes down to. That's how the human mind works. Is we make sense of our world based on the stories we tell ourselves and each other. And we neglect that fact when we just say, oh, we need better policies. No, we need better stories.
Well, as David pointed out in his article, David actually watched the address to Congress by Trump, and it was just a torrent of lies. You know,
Mhm.
that Biden's economy was a disaster, inflation was at an all-time high. There are
Oh,
people over 250-year-olds getting Social Security benefits, and
why
the
would we
21
expect anything
people,
else at this point from Trump? We know
yeah,
that's what he does.
it's just a fire hose of disinformation. And as Steve Bannon uh, pointed out, that the strategy is to flood the zone,
Hmm?
just to flood the zone with disinformation and just create such a torrent of it that it's impossible to overcome.
It's just not a
And
river. It's not just a river of shit, though. It's an alternative story about the United States, that it's a nation in decline and that only Trump can save it. That everything about the United States is wrong and Trump has the answers. That's
well,
the story
half
he's
the
telling.
people in the
It's
country don't agree with
obviously
that.
utter nonsense, but people, a certain number of people, a lot of people apparently believe that narrative of national decline. And what we have to tell is the story, the real story of the United States, the fact
Yes.
that we are a massive success, we continue to be, and we will continue to be, and how the Democrats contribute to that success story.
I agree with both Michael and Larry. I agree. Democrats need to do better at telling stories. I mean, at least their stories will be based on reality and not fairy tales. But I think what Democrats need to do, where Republicans did excel out, was going to more non-mainstream sources. I mean, they made the big deal of Joe Rogan, but Republicans went to sports shows and other venues. I wrote an article one time. If Terry Bradshaw offered a leading Democrat a chance to go in the NFL halftime show, you go. If Martha Stewart offers an opportunity to cook bread, you go. And I mean that, and I think it's both outreach and like Michael says, being able to tell the story and not a 20-page policy paper, something with nice no more than 3 or 4 bullet points to get the point across. Be
No, there are no
and
bullet points in a good story.
well, but,
It's a
but you know what,
narrative. There's a
right,
beginning, a middle, and an end.
right,
There's
but you
a
know what I
there's a
mean.
narrative, and there's a point to it. There's a an ethic.
Right,
There's a history. There's a culture being communicated in the
right,
story, and that's what we've lost sight of. Is that's what drives politics, is narrative, not fucking bullet points.
right. Well,
You know, there was a lot that came out of the Trump campaign that nobody really believed. You know, our immigrants in Ohio eating people's pets.
he
You know,
brought that up. He
that
brought that.
fell that story just fell on
But
its
it's a
face the
great
moment that it
story.
came out.
But it's a great story.
But nobody
It's a
believed it.
compelling
I'm
story
telling you,
that
I
you
was out with
immediately
a
go, "Holy
thousand
fuck!"
people on Saturday and nobody believed it. Half the country doesn't believe the BS that is coming out of Trump's
But
mouth.
half does, and that's the problem.
Yeah,
That
and
that is the problem,
you know.
and
Oh, sorry.
it's interesting because it's like I'm beginning to think he's actually believes the lies that he's telling, that he's just lost it, and thinks, Zelensky started that war. He shouldn't have started that war with Russia, I mean, there's part of me that thinks that he's repeated these things so many times that he now believes those things, which is even scarier, if he's not with it that way, So yeah, I mean the disinformation thing is really really difficult, but I think it also, in addition to telling better stories, I think that Democrats have to do some more listening. I mean, if you look at the map of the country and the votes, we have the quote coastal elites and some random counties here and there, but there's a big swath of the United States that is red, and I don't know if you've ever read Bernie's book, It's Okay to Be Angry About Capitalism, but I finally read that just a few weeks ago. And the first part of it, he kind of goes through like his campaign style. And since he wasn't doing all kinds of phone calls to big donors, he was visiting lots of smaller places and having town halls and talking to people and things like that. And, we need to get to those small towns. I grew up in a small town and I was so excited when I saw the video Obama has a beer in Amherst, Ohio. I mean, nobody came to Amherst when I lived there, and so they really need to reach out more and not just say, okay, we're going to win it with these particular states, and then that's going to be enough. So I think we need to do more listening in addition to better stories and better outreach and alternative media. I mean, if we have an anti-systems revolt, they see the mainstream media as being a system that's broken. And in some ways it is broken. And so, that's why, he may tell these crazy stories, but there's, lots of podcasters and bloggers and, people like Steve Bannon pumping up those stories. And also, AI bots, pushing this stuff out on X and stuff. And so it's massive. But yeah, we need better stories and we need better listening as far as I'm concerned. And so one
Democrats
of
need
the
to
things that I
participate
wanted to ask you guys about is another book that I recently read was this book called The Storm Before the Calm. And this guy, George Friedman, is like a economics forecaster, and the book was written and published in 2020. And it really, I mean, it even says in there in 2025, the shit's going to hit the fan. It's like, how did you know? And so basically what he's saying is that when we have these institutional changes that our history has regular predicted, cycles of 80 years, there's an institutional cycle change, and every 50 years, there's a socioeconomic cycle changing. And so right now, we're kind of at the end of the Reagan era, with the trickle down economics. And so if this is like a cycle, then this really speaks to the Democrats coming up with some new ideas, because he says in the book that the end of each cycle, there's a failed president who tries to use old ideas to solve new problems. Well, he is using old ideas, besides using trickle down economics and deregulation and making the billionaires even richer. I mean, he wants to go back to the 1860s with, reproductive rights, and maybe the 1890s, and Carnegie had the steelworkers shot, and so he's really going backwards in time. And so, what do you think about this being sort of the end of an era, and what can the Democrats do to actually, to sort of capitalize on this idea, that we need a plan for after Trump, or even, now, and we need to start talking about big ideas. And so
I think it's
one of the
I think
things
it's a
that you had
comfortable
pointed out
lie.
about Friedman is that the end of the cycle is marked by a failed president. And I think that's what we've got on our hands here. I think the Trump regime is just going to collapse. They're already facing opposition from the U.S. Supreme Court. Republican elected officials are just getting fury from the elected people. We're in a situation now that nobody wanted, nobody asked for. And, the just applying a sledgehammer to all of our favorite programs, like the Park Service. Why would you cut the Park Service? You can't get into the Grand Canyon now because there's a 20-mile line going into that. This is where people go on car trips with their moms and dads and go on vacation. This is going to start hitting home really soon. And the way that it'll come up are the attempts to cut Medicaid, because Medicaid is widely used in rural areas in the country. That's where most of the Medicaid recipients are. And those are Trump voters. And if you start cutting the benefits of Republican voters, you're gonna lose support immediately. And it's time for Democrats to come in and say, "Hey, we're the party of a good economy, a healthy stock market, rising wages. That's what we're all about." And you can believe all the BS, but we're shooting it straight to you.
Yeah. I think Friedman's telling a comforting falsehood there with this idea of cyclical nature. I mean, any kind of cycles in history are stories. They're fabrications. They're ad hoc, just so stories. And I think being comforted by or mollified by an idea that we've reached a cycle in history and things are going to inevitably turn our way is a mistake, because there's one thing that will turn things our way, and that's our work, our getting out there and doing the work of organizing and politics and storytelling and reimagining our system of government for a new age. We are entering a new era. We have social media, we have AI. These are tools of communication and human organization that we have not had in the past, that we have no idea how they're really going to ultimately impact our society. And during these periods of inflection, of crisis, if you will, it takes a nation, it takes everybody to get out there and to work together to figure out how to do it. The analogy I make to this time period is perhaps the progressive era between like 1890 and 1920 in the last century, where we had one system of governing that was used to a certain kind of societal organization, and it had been, exploited by the wealthy and the best organized to take an inordinate amount of the economic pie and social power, and it took both parties organizing around progressive ideas to come up with systemic changes to the way we organize ourselves and the way we do governance, in order to contain those selfish forces and redirect the new aspects of human nature that have been empowered by the new technology of industry into a system that could benefit everybody more equally. And it's going to take that again. It's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of imagination. And it's going to take all of us. And so relying on some sort of automaticity of historical cycles, I think, is a mistake. You need to get out there and consider what you can do in your local community, what you can do in your area of expertise to make this society more equal, to make it more equitable, to make it more fair, and to make it more humane, and put that to work. Because it's going to take millions of little solutions, not just one big solution to make this society transition into this new era, and make democracy and free markets work in this new era.
Yeah,
David, you want to say that?
yeah, I think no matter what, whether this is a cycle or whether it's not, Democrats have to go to where the voters are. They have to do the outreach. They're not going to come to you like some sort of osmosis. And you need to have the story, and you need to have the policy. You need to have like a New Deal or Great Society type program and story to tell them. And going back to what Larry said, alluded to, Democrats are the party that gave Social Security. They're the party that gave Medicare. They're the party that gave Pell Grants. They're the party that helped start the EPA and the environmental movement. They're the party that, in the last administration, gave you clean energy programs and the infrastructure law and that wonderful multi-billion-dollar plant in Phoenix that's creating all those nice jobs. So I think, going to Michael and Larry's point, I mean, we need to go to them. It could be cyclical, but we shouldn't wait for it to happen. We need to be proactive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
well, I
and
couldn't agree
all this
more.
stuff comes from the bottom up. I mean, the idea that Democrats are going to hire the right consultant and they're going to tell us what to do is absolute nonsense. These solutions come from the bottom up. If you look historically at how these eras of reform build and coalesce around these big ideas like the Great Society or agricultural reform, land reform, anything that's really improved the lot of American people as a whole, it starts at the bottom. The progressive era began with the Grange, which was an uprising by farmers who were being absolutely hammered by industrial change in this country. It came from everyday people working in city governments across the country, those progressive ideas and those experiments that were utilized in order to scale up some of those solutions. It has always come from the bottom, the best ideas. We're not going to impose
And muckraking journalists.
Yeah, absolutely.
And just to append to your point, I mean, now is the time to get active.
Yep.
Now is the time for people who are tired of this crazy shit show that we're involved in. Look up your legislative district. There are 30 of them in Arizona. Contact the chair and go to one of the meetings and find a way to become active. I'm seeing more and more people signing up to become Democratic Precinct Committee people. And In fact, in LD18, we have half of the precinct committee people in the entire county. And we knock on doors, we come to meetings. We've started publishing a fight back bulletin so that everybody on our mailing list of thousands of people know, here's an event at Juan Ciscomani's office. Here's an event, you know, uh, protesting at the Tesla dealership. And stop sitting on the couch and stop brooding. I mean, we all know that we're being lied to, and find out a way to plug in and get active, and that'll make all the difference.
Yeah, and the resistance can't be invisible. I mean, you have to understand that our current media ecosystem responds to certain things better than other things. The fact is that going to a town hall and making a fuss has a enormously outsized effect. I mean, that's how the Tea Party started. That's how this whole craziness with MAGA started, was that narrative that was picked up by the traditional media and run with. And you have to understand that, to tell that story of resistance and the unpopularity of this administration's policies, you have to play to that prejudice, show up, protest, like Groucho Marx apparently said, showing up is 90% of life. So get out there, get active, get angry, because that's what's going to, change the narrative and change the momentum. So Larry's absolutely right. You need to get out there.
Yeah, you guys already, I didn't even have to ask my last question about what people should do. You guys just did it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think so too. I mean, they don't necessarily get reported in the mainstream media. In fact, I don't always listen to Democracy Now! With Amy Goodman because sometimes she's just too depressing. But the other day she had a whole rundown of different types of protests that were going on, and they mentioned the Tesla protest in Tucson. But there were a number of things that I hadn't read anywhere else, and I read multiple news sources, and so yeah, people need to voice their concern however they can. If it's the not the buy nothing days, or showing up at Tesla, or not buying things from certain billionaires who are pulling the strings in the government, like a owner of Amazon, and stuff like that. And so I think that's the only way that we can get notice, is to push back however we can.
Try everything,
Even
but
yeah, I mean,
notice what has worked in the past. Notice that movements and resistance grow from events, from things that the news can cover. So
right.
try and make your whatever you're trying to do, as media friendly as possible, because that's how you're going to get noticed.
So
And
I'd like to shift gears a little bit, unless you guys have something else to say about the national government. We could fix
uh,
and go
if,
ahead.
if I may, Pamela, just quickly, and when the outreach has to be everywhere. I mean, simply it has to be everywhere. I just did an interview. It's coming out tomorrow with the new party chair, and one of his comments was he wants to you could tell from his comments he wants to focus on Ciscomani and Schweiker because those are the two gettable seats. Well, I mean, there are Democrats in Gosar's district. There are Democrats in Biggs district. There are Democrats in Crane and Hamada's district. I mean, if the surest way to depress turnout is not to pay attention to them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, I've looked at like voting data in other years, and often, people who have safe seats don't really do a lot of campaigning, right?
Yeah.
And so you'll see that we're winning those safe seats, like Grijalva's seat, or Gallegos' former congressional seat, with very
Sorry.
low numbers, whereas even their safe seats, man, they're blasting the doors out on those votes, even on their safe seats. And so when we're just targeting, we're shooting ourselves in the foot, as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, I agree with you on that, we need, a 30 district, 50 state strategies, not, just, oh, we're going to win this one seat and then we'll be fine. That hasn't helped us out any.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well,
Anyway,
since we
let's
are a
shift
blog
to
for Arizona, shall we
state.
focus on some Arizona issues?
Yes, yes. In fact, you guys, I think, are following this stuff closer than I am. And so, what's the legislature up to? And I don't know who wants to go first on this.
Well, if I may, like I said, Democrats are championing an affordability agenda, and some of their some admittedly, it's small ball, but some of their legislation is starting to get through. I wrote a couple of pieces. The ADLCC put out a press release last week highlighting some of the issues that will help people in terms of make the cost of living, which is good. There's a lot of flack right now over funding for children with disabilities because our Republican friends want to screw them but not touch the ESA welfare for the wealthy program for the private school vouchers. And Hobbs just put out a new proposal on Proposition 123 for education, and because they're competing there. And also there's a tug of war. Priya's a part of Sunderson's a part of this, and the governor on groundwater. Republicans are putting up measures that seem to favor more corporate interests, and the governor has a bipartisan solution that's not getting a hearing right now.
Mhm. Yeah, I guess the short answer to what's going on in Arizona is nothing good. Certainly nothing coming from the legislature is any good. 90% of the bills, of the hundreds of bills that are dropped in the Arizona legislature, are absolute trash. Stuff from, American Legislative Exchange or ALEC, whatever, trends to, fight culture wars and, defund public institutions, defund public education. And I think probably the most disturbing thing and the most troubling thing and the most consequential thing is, essentially the Republicans are trying to pass what they call the Taxpayers Bill of Rights, or TABOR, kind of light version here in Arizona, with automatic cuts to certain income tax rates if there's a budget surplus, and they're probably going to try and get that in front of voters in the next cycle in 26. And they'll probably succeed. And so that's a big messaging issue, is to stop that kind of nonsense, because it's brainless, and it does nothing but harm us, because structurally, Arizona over relies on certain kind of taxes and under relies on others. Specifically, we over rely on sales tax more to a greater extent than a lot of other states. And so if you have a good business cycle one year, you might have excess revenues, but that doesn't mean you have, excess capacity to cut taxes permanently. That just means you're having a good year. And so that's essentially what they're trying to institute into our Constitution, is a automaticity, saying anytime we have a good year, we're going to cut taxes. And that's just going to be a disaster for everybody, especially public education, which is sort of the main job of state government. Is that's a huge part of our revenue expenditures is public education. And they're doing everything they can to undermine it, especially with these ESA vouchers. I mean, we're spending upward almost $1 billion, basically subsidizing the wealthiest people's private school tuition. And it's at the expense of every public education institution and child out there. And that's still more than 90% of our children go to public education. And they're doing their best to kill it, because they understand that a poorly educated public is an easily led public, an easily dominated public. And I guess the second thing is, they're trying to push back on the Arizona voters who recently, last election, passed a constitutional amendment to protect abortion rights. And so they're trying to do everything they can to obfuscate that point and chip away at the right that voters have granted the women of Arizona. So I think those are the big picture items that we're going to be looking at coming out of Arizona. And we can thank God we have a Democratic governor. The question is whether we'll still have a Democratic governor when she runs for re-election.
Well, that's a good point, because right now there hasn't been anything good to come out of the Republican legislature in 20 years. And that trend is certainly continuing. And yes, thank God that we have Katie Hobbs, who vetoes. She's issued more vetoes, I believe, than any other governor in the history of the state.
Yeah.
And that's going to continue. And you can see the frustration in the Republican legislature, because they're constantly putting things on the ballot for voters to vote against their own self-interest.
A record number last
that's why we had a 3 or 4 page ballot in 2024 with all of these propositions. Most of them went absolutely no place.
A few of them did go someplace.
More than the same, and it points up the fact that 2026 is a very big year. Not only is Katie Hobbs up for election, so is the Attorney General, Chris Mays, and so is our Secretary of State, Adrian Fontes. We need to keep these people in office and vote out people like Tom Horn, who has just single-handedly been, pumping life into the ESA program that, vouchers for the rich that nobody voted for.
And that, if I may, and bring up Tom Horn, he supports and he supports abolishing the federal Department of Education because it's doing, and I mentioned this in the email, he wants to do away with DEI. When did diversity, equity, and inclusion become dirty words in mainstream America? I mean, I don't get it. And you have John Kavanaugh, our buddy, constantly supporting these bathroom bills. I mean, how's that going to help eighth graders be proficient in math or English? And we're not talking about hundreds of kids here on this bathroom issue. We're talking about maybe a dozen, if that, across the country. I mean, I've seen the numbers. It's minuscule, and they're making a major issue out of this. I mean, Trump devoted time to this. He even had some kid who got hurt, I guess, from a transgender athlete in a game. And he devoted time to that in the State of the Union speech. And I don't know. I mean, to me, these are innocent children.
Yeah, well, it's also a story that most people, they hear it and they say, well, that's unfair to have a boy compete against a girl in sports, or that I feel icky about that. If there were a man in my bathroom and I'm a woman, that would make me feel icky.
Right.
So they're not important public policy issues, but they are important cultural issues, and that's what they want to just distract us with, because they don't really have an agenda other than cutting taxes.
Right.
And destroying public education.
Getting back to Michael's point on the icky factor, if I may, how do Democrats overcome the icky factor? Because he's right. I mean, I'm 58. I have to admit, when someone says that, I got to admit, I do pause.
Yeah.
Being honest, it's how I was brought up. I'm sorry.
If I had the answer to that, Dave, I'd be a millionaire.
Right. Okay. Okay.
Well, and if there was any doubt as to the importance of DEI, all you need to look is at the at the Brigham Young University game, where Arizona students were sitting there hurling curses, curse the Mormons. I don't want to repeat the slur, but boy, if anybody needed DEI, it's those students in the stands. And there's no overwhelming desire to get rid of DEI. I mean, it's the same as the Civil Rights Act. What's wrong with diversity and inclusion? That's what people want. They don't want people being discriminated against. And that's going to be a downfall for the Republican state legislatures as well as Trump.
White men. That's the answer. Is who's threatened by it? White men are threatened by it. People exactly like us.
Right. At that address, I'm sorry,
Republicans
Michael.
want to appeal to.
I'm sorry. At that address last night, the whole Joint Chiefs, they were all white men because they got rid of the women. Leaders of the Navy and the Coast Guard and the Black Joint Chiefs chairman. And Trump's cabinet, there's maybe one token black, the head of HUD, and I think that's where Trump thinks blacks belong. I really think that. I mean, but it's all white people, pretty much.
Yeah, it's interesting because David Brooks had an article in the New York Times recently about the DEI and the wokeness and DOGE and how they're going after certain programs and things like that. And I had read earlier that with the healthcare workers that they have fired, that they're predominantly African American. We do have a lot of public health programs that are trying to make sure people get into services and they access abortion and contraception and things like that. And they're working in poorer states. And so, there would be a lot of Black people in there. But he said that in addition to sort of ferreting out people of color, that by going after anything that looks like DEI, they're also being able to eliminate the elites from government, the well-educated progressives. And so they're trying to get rid of progressives and any programs that help, people who are not white men, and they're kind of like have a win-win going here, because they're hurting the people who benefit from these programs, but they're also, hurting the progressives, or maybe the left-leaning people who are the bleeding heart liberals who are trying to take care of these people. And so I think it's a fascinating argument, because I hadn't heard about that. I mean, I've heard multiple people talk about DEI, and there's some people on the left who are saying that the DEI programs were just false statements that corporations were hiding behind. And if they had unions in those corporations, that would be better, because they would ensure that there's equity and diversity in the corporate workforce. So
Totally
yeah, I
agree,
mean,
but we've kind of lost focus on Arizona, though. So
yeah,
if
go
I could
ahead.
bend it back there, I'd like to make a
Uh,
suggestion. Is that one of the things that I think we could be doing, because we can't really advance an agenda through the legislature. And so, as admirable as it is for the Democratic caucus to put forward an alternative agenda, I think that the strength of what we have in Arizona is that we hold three of the big statewide offices. And one of the things we could be doing with that is promoting ballot measures. We could run some initiatives that really target what the Republicans are trying to do versus what we stand for. One of the things I think we should absolutely do is run a prop to make it illegal to fund public schools. Just no private money for public schools. Period. End of statement. Put that in the Constitution as unambiguously as possible, because there already is a provision that implies, at least, that you shouldn't be spending public money on private schools, but it's been interpreted away essentially by the state Supreme Court. So what we need to do, I think, one of the strongest things we could do is to make that straight up illegal, and to run a campaign straight at that, because that is one of the most egregious things and most unpopular things that the Republican Party is doing here in Arizona, is spearheading this push to underfund and unfund public education by making these vouchers available not just to private schools but parochial religious schools as well. And we just need to take that straight on. And if Fontes and Mays and Governor Hobbs would take that on as a project and champion that at the state level and use their bully pulpits to promote that, and to target that, I think we could have a lot of success. Because quite frankly, Hobbs doesn't have a lot to run on. I vetoed more bills than any other Arizona governor is not a great campaign slogan. But if she had an issue, championing public education for the 90% of the kids who get it in this country, in this state, I think that's a very popular issue. And the vouchers are, quite frankly, unjustifiable. They're very unpopular when people understand where that money goes and how it's spent. And if we focused on that issue, I think we could have a major victory for Hobbs, and we could keep a hold of those statewide offices. But I don't see any movement to doing that, to developing a real message and a real accomplishment for this Democratic administration that we have here in Arizona. And so I'd like to see, the state party do better in terms of, actually picking a fight that they can win.
I agree with Michael. If I may, I hope I'm not interrupting you, Larry. Two things, and Michael talked about parochial schools, also turning points.
Yeah.
The Charlie Kirk outfit,
Yes.
they're using the voucher system for their indoctrination centers. Also, I agree with Michael on picking a fight. Last year when she caved, okay, when I think she caved on the budget, I think
Oh, you're right. She caved.
Okay,
Caved.
I think Hobbs needs to be like Bill Clinton in 95, 96 and say, these are my budget priorities. I will veto anything. And he won that debate, and he coasted to re-election.
Yeah, she should have done that her first year, but she absolutely didn't, and she stopped anyone from really standing up or understanding the budget. I mean,
Right.
if I were her, the first thing I would have done is I'd say, number one, you're going to go back to regular order. You're going to have hearings in committees on all aspects of this budget. We're going to have a full and fair public hearing about this budget proposal. Number two, if it does not include my priorities and exclude certain things that I say are no go, I'm going to veto it. Period. End of statement. And you guys don't have the votes to overturn me. And
Right.
just put her head in the sand and stayed on that position the
Right.
public would have gone with her, the press would have gone with her, they would have respected her, but she ditched it the first year, and so momentum gave her
Oh,
the reason to ditch it the second year, and now the third year and the fourth year, and before you know it, she's going to have a budget that it might as well be under a goddamn Republican governor.
well, that's why she needs to put her foot down now. Better late than never.
Yeah, maybe.
So do you think that they're going to have another budget like the other ones that they had, where everybody gets to pick their pork barrel project and stick it in, whether the people want it or not? Is that what
If
they're
they
going to do
need to
again this
keep
year?
if they need to keep their caucus together on spending priorities, then yeah, that's the reason we got it last time, was the basic log rolling. It's the only way they were able to keep their caucus together to pass a budget. They may be more unified this year. There's been more and more magnification of the Republican caucus, so maybe. But if they don't need to do that in order to pass their extreme budget through the House and the Senate, then they won't do it.
They feel
Mike and David, the activists in the Democratic Party are very much in support of what you're talking about. In fact, at the last organization meeting of the Arizona Democratic Party, they cashiered the old chair because she didn't get the vote out. She didn't get the message across. She didn't come up with a strategy. And now Democratic activists have voted in Robert Branscombe. He's the new chair of the Democratic Party. I hold a lot of hope with him. He's on a big listening tour. I know he came to LD18 and several other legislative districts as well. And he's getting input, and you're going to see a guy fight back. So
I wish him
I'm
well.
putting
But,
my hopes in Branscombe.
yeah,
state party chairs don't really have all that much power to set agendas. It's really the elected officials and the candidates that do that. I mean, mainly the point of a state party chair is to raise money for state party operations. And
well, that's pretty
I thought
important,
the previous chair did a fine job of that. But I mean, it's fair to hold her responsible for losses in Arizona. That's fair. But I don't know how important that position really is. I mean, it looms large in our minds, but in terms of its actual impact on state politics, I question whether or not it really is all that important.
David, you had something to say?
no, like I said, I have an interview with Brent. I did with Branscombe coming out tomorrow, and yeah, he seemed, he seems like he has his foot on the ground of what he wants to do, and I think he knows what needs to be done. But Michael's right. I mean, it's the candidates you recruit. It's the candidates you put up.
I mean, the party chair's responsibility mainly is to fund the party, to raise the funds, to rally the troops, to rally the faithful, to open their pockets and fund the state party operations.
Right. I mean, look, and would David Schweikert be the representative if the Democrats had put up one of the other probably better candidates? I won't name names. One of them just announced she's running again, and yesterday
David's a notorious moderate.
I take a little issue with that. Yes, I am on some issues, but I'm as liberal on some things as you are, Michael. And you have Joanna Mendoza now running for the nomination. I don't know if Engel's going to make a comeback. Maybe two times is enough for her.
Probably.
But Joanna Mendoza is impressive. I mean,
absolutely.
Yeah, Engel
and
was
she fits
too.
the district very well.
What's that?
She fits the district very well.
Yeah.
And it's straight out of central casting. You couldn't ask for a better candidate than a vet, a Marine veteran,
Right.
A business owner, a Hispanic woman, a Latino lady. She's fantastic, and she's a good speaker. She knows how to run a campaign. She's run others' campaigns,
Right.
so she has a good view from behind the bleachers, as it were. And so I think she'll be an excellent candidate, and she's an excellent choice to take on Ciscomani.
And she's starting early like Gallego did.
Absolutely. Yeah, you have to start early.
Yeah.
So speaking of candidates, I heard that Senate President Warren Peterson is going to run for Attorney General. What do you guys think about that? And Chris Mays.
Has he ever even practiced law? I mean, but then again, I guess the guy Hamada who ran last time hadn't really practiced all that much law either. Ended up being a congressman, I guess. But nonetheless, I would question his qualifications. And Peterson is just, he's kind of a schmuck.
Okay.
Well, and he was one of the main Stop the Steals guys with the Maricopa County fraud it. In fact, I think he got his law degree just like 6 weeks before the January 6th, and so yeah, I mean, he hasn't really practiced that as a lawyer. He's only been in the legislature with a safe district. So, but
Right.
yeah, I mean, that's scary, the idea that he might become attorney general. I mean, I love Chris Mays, and so yeah, we really need to figure out how we get to keep those three in office,
Well, Mays is
because
doing a
all
great
three of them are
job.
great.
Mays is doing a great job of keeping herself in the press. Mays is doing a great
Oh,
job
yeah.
of standing up for people's rights, of pushing back against the Trump administration. Mays is making all the right moves for
Right.
reelection
And
if she
she's going
decides
on,
that's what she wants to do.
and she's going on Fox News. She's going on Midas Touch. She's going out to the social media outreach. Now, my dream candidate, guys, is Andy Biggs for governor.
Well, he's announced that he wants to do it.
Yeah,
So,
so I mean, but maybe the best thing Democrats could do is contribute to his campaign so he can win the primary.
yeah, talk about anti-charisma. Oh my God, that guy. Oof.
Yeah, but
Is he the one that won the Publishers Clearinghouse or
Yeah.
something?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah, he won a couple mil and parlayed it into a political career. Good for
Yeah.
him.
right.
But
I
he
haven't heard
thinks
about
that
anybody
makes him like some kind of champion of free markets or something. I don't get it.
Yeah,
who's running against Fontes. Have you guys heard anything about that?
I've not heard of anybody interested in that.
no, maybe
I
maybe
think the big race is going to be governor and I
right.
guess now lieutenant governor because we have one of those now. So I imagine we're going to see a team emerging on the Republican side for challenging whoever our candidate for lieutenant governor will be. I assume our governor is going to run for re-election. I assume that she'd be renominated, but that's questionable. I mean, I've heard rumblings from both Mays and Fontes people that they have both considered. I don't know whether they've ruled out, but they've both considered challenging Hobbs in a primary for the governorship. So that might happen. Who knows? Both of them perceive our governor as being weak and a weak candidate, more specifically.
Yeah.
Well, we can only hope that the Republicans turn to Kerry Lake again, or another candidate like Kerry Lake.
Well,
to
that's
win governor.
that's Biggs, Larry.
Somebody pure MAGA who just comes right out there and
That's Biggs. Yeah,
That's Biggs.
he's got his nose so far up Trump's rear. Ugh.
yeah.
I mean, and yeah, I agree. And Michael and I have the same off the record sources, who who make the same points. So on that, and hopefully they'll keep their mouth shut by the general election.
So this has been fun. I'm going to give you guys each like a couple minutes to kind of wrap up and give your parting thoughts on this. But it's been fun, and I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. So,
We'd love to
Mike,
do it
do you
more
want to
often.
start again?
Yeah,
This is
absolutely.
good fun.
Yeah, this is.
Any parting thoughts?
Go
Oh,
ahead,
me?
Michael. You're the elder statesman.
Oh, No, why don't you guys go ahead and then I'll pick up slack wherever you guys may not have touched on something that I want to talk about.
Well,
Okay.
let me renew my urging for people to look up their legislative district, get active in your local LD. That's how you find like-minded people. That's why you find opportunities to protest. That's where you find opportunities to meet like-minded people. And you're going to see a lot more pushback. And it's time for you to get off the couch and join that pushback. We have new Democratic leadership in the state, and yes, I mean they do fund the Democratic Party, but all the money that they get goes to Governor Hobbs, Adrian Fontes, and Chris Mays, and we just need to hit more on kitchen table issues. The price of rent, affordable housing, the price of a mortgage, the price of groceries. This is the stuff that people face every single day and makes them decide whether they're happy or that the country's going in the right direction. And so the more the Democrats can focus on pocketbook issues, the better.
Okay. I'll go. I think they're moving forward the next couple election cycles. There are four main things that the party needs to do. One, I think, goes to Michael O'Leary's point. It needs to be a bottom up. campaign, how many legislative seats were lost because people only cared about the top of the ticket and didn't pay attention to the LD slots. You need good quality candidates that will run well in the districts. We talked about Joanna Mendoza being like out of central casting. Michael made that. You need a strong vision, message, and story. You need to campaign everywhere on terra firma and social media to better inform the voters. I mean, you can't Trump was successful and these MAGA guys were successful because they campaigned where we didn't. And like I said in my comments, if Terry Bradshaw invites you on an NFL halftime show, you go. If Martha Stewart wants you on a cook show, you go. I mean, these guys did. We need to do the same thing.
Mike?
Yeah, I think what I would add is political parties, and especially the Democratic Party, kind of have a bias towards normalcy. That we kind of run our campaigns as if these are normal times, and they're not. They're as far from normal as it's possible to get. And so one of the things I think that is really important is that we position ourselves as a party to pick up the pieces if Trump smashes the crockery entirely and totally bombs the Republican Party out. Because that's to my mind like the best outcome that we can hope for out of this whole thing, is that we could have an absolute earthquake politically as a result of this presidency. And so if we're going to see that in 26 in the midterms, we have to be well positioned to do that. That means contest every seat, regardless of how hopeless it seems. We need to have real good quality candidates who can step up and really do a job of campaigning hard, campaigning smart, and actually win the seat and actually run the offices that we're up for. And so I think that means for the people who would be likely to listen to this podcast, they're political junkies. They're political veterans. They are people who are really interested in the political future of this country. And my encouragement to them is run for something, regardless of what it is, run for it. If you live in a non-competitive district, file to run, because this is the time that we need to be positioned to actually pick up the broken pieces. And we could have a landslide, and we need to be prepared for it. And that means having good quality people in every race, everywhere. So that's my message is, even if you don't think you're the right person, if you have the kind of skills and intelligence and awareness of the political issues that you think could possibly, be relevant to running this country, get out there and run, because, that's gonna be the most important thing, is that we have candidates on every ballot for every position.
Oh, definitely. And, there was a headline in the New York Times that the Democrats need a Project 2029. We totally need a Project 2029. So anyway, I really appreciate you guys being here. It was a lot of fun, and you ought to come back again. Thank you for listening to A View from the Left Side today. For now, this is Pamela Powers signing off. If you like this podcast, please subscribe, like it on social media, make a comment, and share it with your friends. In the meantime, please take care, be healthy, and stay vigilant. See you next time.